Kia ora and welcome. My name's Tracy and this is part 2 of the environmental impact of glass bottles. If you haven't seen part 1 where we discussed the impacts of raw materials extraction and glass bottle production, you can check that out up here. In that video, we saw that glass bottles actually have the highest greenhouse gas emissions of all single-use beverage packaging materials. However, all that can change with effective recycling and reuse schemes. So let's investigate, starting with recycling. Theoretically, glass is infinitely recyclable, with no loss in quality. Moreover, the recycling process generates virtually no waste or byproducts. However, there are practical limitations that make 100% recycled glass products unfeasible within the current recycling frameworks. Mixing of glass types, colours and non-glass contaminants, such as in curbside recycling, limits their reuse. Different glass types with varying chemical compositions, for instance window panes and Pyrex containers, are unsuitable for new glass containers. Colour contamination tolerance is very low for flint glass, so more virgin materials must be added to ensure colour consistency. Making amber glass requires particularly fine colour control, as the colour comes from a chemical reaction of the trace iron oxide, and organic contamination from food or plastic can impact the colour. Green glass is the most tolerant of colour contamination, but impurities contaminating the cullet can still cause defects in the final product, causing them to fail at any point in the onward supply chain. Thus, glass recycling requires careful management to ensure cullet purity and increase the amount of recycled content in new glass bottles. The glass recycling process varies depending on local collection methods and the capabilities of processing facilities. Initially, mixed materials are sorted to extract glass, followed by separation by type and ideally colour sorting for container glass. Glass not sorted by colour is repurposed for insulation products instead of new containers. To eliminate contaminants, crushers first break the glass into fragments, with blown air used to remove paper and plastic. Magnets are used to remove metal objects, while coatings, adhesives, food residues, and any remaining labels are burned, melted, or washed off. Finally, the glass cullet undergoes further crushing and sorting by particle size before being sent to glass manufacturers to combine with virgin raw materials and melt into new products. Maximising cullet use in glass manufacturing offers 3 main environmental benefits. It avoids the adverse impacts of raw material production, lowers emissions from carbonate decomposition, and cuts energy consumption by enabling a reduction in furnace operating temperatures. 1 tonne of cullet replaces 1.2 tonnes of raw materials, mitigating 180 kgs of carbon dioxide emissions from carbonate decomposition and reducing the energy required for melting by 1.2 gigajoules. Assuming that natural gas serves as a primary fuel source, with an emission factor of 56 kgs of carbon dioxide per gigajoule, this translates into an additional emission saving of 67 kgs of carbon dioxide. Determining the mitigated energy consumption and emissions associated with raw materials extraction was extremely challenging based on the available literature. A rough estimate using the raw materials extraction figures provided in part 1, assuming a silica, soda ash, limestone mix ratio of 65-25-10, indicates potential savings of up to 4.1 gigajoules and 570 kgs of CO2, primarily attributed to the avoidance of soda ash production. These figures sum to a total potential reduction in energy consumption and emissions of up to 5.3 gigajoules and 817 kgs of CO2 per tonne of recycled glass. A similar assessment conducted for the British Glass Manufacturers Confederation in 2003, factoring in transportation, recycled material preparation and disposal, found net emission savings of 314 kgs per tonne when comparing 100% recycled glass to 100% raw materials. This is much less than our estimate, which was only considering the mitigated emissions from the avoidance of raw materials extraction. And this can be fully attributed to the assumptions made in the study. This report used a value of 244 kgs of carbon dioxide emitted per tonne of soda ash produced, which is significantly lower than the estimates found in the literature, which ranged from 300 kgs to 1.84 tonnes of CO2, depending on the source of soda ash. This highlights the significant role that soda ash production plays in the carbon footprint of glass manufacture. And we actually saw this in the aluminium video as well, where studies on the effects of recycling vastly underreported the emissions associated with raw materials extraction. Despite the clear benefits of glass recycling, the worldwide recycling rate for glass containers remains dismally low at 32%, with large discrepancies between nations. In 2022, Zero Waste Europe commissioned a study on the circularity of single-use glass containers using 2019 data from Germany, France, the US, and the UK. The study assessed 4 key performance indicators relative to glass packaging placed on the market: the collection rate, which is glass collected for recycling; the overall recycling rate, that is glass collected that is actually recycled; the closed-loop recycling rate, reclaimed glass used exclusively in new packaging production; and the recycled content rate, which is the proportion of recycled material in new glass packaging. Germany excelled across all metrics, boasting an 81% collection rate and 77% closed-loop recycling rate. Conversely, the US lagged behind with a 44% collection rate and a dismal 21% closed-loop recycling rate. This disparity was compounded by a striking 7% discrepancy between glass collection and recycling rates, far higher than the 2 to 3% observed in other participating countries, underscoring deep-rooted challenges within the US recycling infrastructure. In Germany and France, only 2% and 9% of the sorted cullet respectively was used for recycling applications other than container glass. In the UK and the US, this figure reached 40% and 39% respectively, which can be attributed to both countries' reliance on commingled collection systems, that is, glass collected with other types of packaging, as opposed to the separate collection stream for glass used in Germany and France. Noteworthy was the variability of recycled content in new packaging, spanning from 30% in the US to an impressive 65% in Germany. The recycled content rates in the UK and the US were actually higher than their closed-loop recycling rate. These countries are net importers of glass packaging, meaning more glass packaging enters their markets than is domestically produced. Conversely, France and Germany export a large amount of their glass packaging, resulting in a lower recycled content rate than would be expected from their closed-loop recycling rates. Current limitations to circularity include the use of commingled collection systems, colour-mixed glass collection systems, packaging design, logistics, economics, and a lack of supportive public policy in some countries. These findings underscore an urgent need for concerted action to enhance recycling infrastructure and foster a more sustainable circular economy. Higher recycling rates are essential for fostering a more sustainable glass container industry. But even a 100% recycling rate doesn't eliminate the energy-intensive nature of glass production. For glass to become a truly sustainable option, we need to move away from single-use packaging entirely and adopt a culture of reuse. Assessments of the environmental impacts of reusing glass bottles are highly dependent on the system boundaries, as factors like washing and transportation emissions become increasingly important over multiple reuse cycles. Nevertheless, numerous studies have highlighted the substantial environmental benefits of transitioning to a refillable glass packaging system by avoiding the high greenhouse gas emissions associated with new production. Notably, a 2013 study showed a remarkable 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions after only the second use, with subsequent reuses yielding even greater benefits before plateauing after about 8 uses. On average, reusable glass bottles emit 85% less greenhouse gases compared to single-use glass bottles, 70% less than plastic bottles, and 57% less than aluminium cans. This demonstrates that despite the high impacts of new production, efficient reuse can render glass bottles a very sustainable choice. Similar to their strides in recycling, Germany sets the benchmark in glass container reuse initiatives, providing a robust model for how refillable bottle systems could be effectively adopted by other nations. German legislation mandates a 70% market share for refillable containers within the overall beverage market. And although this target has not yet been reached, the market share for refillable containers reached an impressive 41.8% in 2019 and continues to increase each year. Similarly, France has set a goal for 10% of packaging to be reusable by 2027. Both countries rely on well-structured nationwide deposit return schemes to bolster their recycling and reuse efforts. These schemes encourage consumers and businesses to return beverage containers to designated facilities by imposing a refundable deposit fee at the time of purchase. Across Europe, existing deposit return schemes achieved glass collection rates ranging from 84% to 89% in 2019, with notable improvements in subsequent years. For example, Finland recorded an incredible 98% glass collection rate in 2021. These achievements show the transformative potential of progressive recycling and reuse initiatives and offer a blueprint for the rest of the world to follow. But to ensure that bottle reuse schemes are as sustainable as possible, minimizing transportation emissions is crucial. The current trend towards individually designed bottles would necessitate return to specific bottlers in a reuse system, leading to potentially very high transport distances. Conversely, adopting pool systems where multiple bottlers choose from a few standardized bottle designs can optimize logistics and minimize transportation requirements. This approach would be particularly effective in the wine industry, which almost exclusively relies on single-use glass bottles, despite similar designs and long transport distances between production and consumption regions. For glass packaging to offer a truly circular, environmentally friendly, refillable option that effectively reduces greenhouse gas emissions, moving to a pull system is imperative. When it comes to greenhouse gas emissions and thus their contribution to climate change, glass bottles are simultaneously the worst and best packaging option. Glass is a quality, heavy, durable material. It should never be single-use, but instead form part of a circular, sustainable, refillable system. This will require substantial infrastructural adjustments and investments. We all want to lessen our environmental impacts, but individually, we have very little control over those impacts. We need to collectively advocate for the adoption of circular systems. We need to push policymakers to move to single-stream recycling, implement deposit return schemes, and force beverage packaging manufacturers to take responsibility for the waste that they create, rather than continue to place that responsibility on consumers who ultimately have very little control over how that waste is managed or whether it is actually turned into new products. So that's all I had prepared for our glass bottles analysis today. Don't forget to check out the literature review in the video description below for a list of the sources that I use if you want to go deeper on the topic. I did want to add just a little addendum. Initially, the plan was to make a third analysis on plastic bottles, and I do hope to still do this. However, I was a little overwhelmed by the amount of time it took to research the aluminium and glass bottles essays. It actually took 2 full months of research on these two topics, and then a further few weeks to actually make these videos and edit them because I hadn't done it before. And I think the plastic bottle research is going to take significantly longer. There is so much greenwashing and misinformation that I am a little bit apprehensive about starting that analysis. Also, I'm probably going to be moving soon, so that's going to take up a lot of my time. So I just wanted to give you my thoughts on which beverage packaging option you should choose in which scenario. If there is an efficient glass bottle reuse scheme in place where you live, then that is hands down the best option. Go for that. If not, and you only have access to single-use packaging, then aluminium is the better option. If you're just comparing greenhouse gas emissions, aluminium does come with that significant amount of bauxite residue that is created in new production, but as long as we're recycling aluminium, then eventually, hopefully, we will get to 100% recycled cans, in which case bauxite residue won't be an issue. The one thing I cannot recommend is opting for plastic bottles. The issue of plastic waste is so significant that any option other than plastic is a good option. There is enough plastic in this world without using plastic packaging as well, So that's it from me today. If you haven't already seen it, you can click here to check out the aluminium cans analysis. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.